Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, and I just got the brand new LEGO Collectible Minifigure Series in hand and ready to review. This is a really interesting original minifig series with some really high highs and some questionable additions, and I'm really curious what you think of this brand new series. Thanks to LEGO for sending me this early for review, and let's jump into my early thoughts right now. Okay, so here is the LEGO Collectible Minifigure Series 27 full lineup. Once again, this is a tower that was sent to me containing the entire series. You can actually purchase these in Europe, although unfortunately we don't really have these in the US. The figures in the series are the Wolfpack Beastmaster, the Pirate Quartermaster, the Steampunk Inventor, Pterodactyl Costume Fan, the Boogeyman, a Jetpack Racer, which is my personal favorite figure, the Cat Lover, a Longboarder, Astronomer Kid, Cupid, the Hamster Costume Fan, and the Plush Toy Collector. Altogether, this is a really interesting and diverse series, and honestly, I feel like some of the best figures in this series have really high highs, and I get really excited about them, but at the same time, there are some inclusions in this series that are a little bit strange to me, and ones that I feel maybe didn't even necessarily need to be collectible minifigures. Starting off with the overall composition of the entire series as a whole, before we jump into the in-depth looks at each of the minifigures, I actually find this one pretty interesting in the way it's split up. We have a few nostalgic references and callbacks, I guess some more heavily called back than others. We have multiple different costumed minifigures, which typically they only do one per series, and I don't really know if we necessarily needed two for this particular series. And then we have a large number of just generic civilian figures, 4 out of the 12 minifigures in the series that could very realistically just fit into the city, and that's not counting the people in costumes. That's the Crazy Cat Lover, the Telescope Kid, the Plush Toy Collector, and the Longboarder, all of which feel pretty much at home at a LEGO City type of setup, and they just have slightly more detail than the average minifigure. Some of course are more interesting than others, but unfortunately, with a third of the series being generic civilian minifigures and only a couple of different fantastical items here and there, I have to wonder what went into the planning of this series that made them make these decisions. Still, that being said, I am absolutely biased here. I'm the type of person or collector who would absolutely gravitate a lot more to a minifigure like the Steampunk Inventor, or the Wolfpack Beastmaster, or the Jetpack Racer, and even the Pirate Quartermaster, although I do feel like that one could have been a lot better, and because of that, I definitely wish that we had a few more of minifigures like those instead of the regular kind of civilian figures that we get in this series. Nothing really against them, just not necessarily my interest, and those who collect and display LEGO cities might feel completely differently, and I totally understand that. This is after all a review based on my own opinions, and I'm really curious to hear yours as well. But with that, let's actually just start into ranking some of these figures, and I'm going to jump into rankings here before we actually go into the individual figures, and we're going to see if you agree or disagree with my rankings by the time the video is over. Number 1 for me is the Jetpack Racer. I think that one is the most exciting. It is covered in really cool prints. It has a phenomenal dual molded helmet that reminds me of Space Police 1 colors, and it just is super cool. Next up, I gotta give it to the Wolfpack Beastmaster, and I fully admit this is because I love nostalgic callbacks to vintage LEGO sub-themes. The Steampunk Inventor comes up next just because of the great printing and design, and because we don't really get a lot of steampunk stuff in LEGO in general. I think the last steampunk-focused LEGO items that we really got were like Ninjago Skybound back in 2016, and even then they had kind of their own aesthetic going on. Speaking of pirates, while I do feel like the Pirate Quartermaster could have been so much more, it is still a really nicely detailed minifigure, and from there, my next favorite is the Boogeyman. Just feels like a really interesting and unique character. The Telescope Kid is actually next just because of a really interesting, innovative new arm element, which we'll take a look at closer on. Then we have Cupid, which is just a really cute looking character, but I actually think the design of the character is very sweet and interesting. And then I guess I would choose the Pterodactyl Costume Fan just for those new arms, the Longboarder for the new longboard element, and I honestly don't really know how I'd rank the rest of them. They're not super interesting to me. I mean, I guess if I had to pick, the Hamster Costume Fan is cute, and then the Plush Toy Collector because it has new molds, and then the Crazy Cat Lover, but honestly, I'm just really excited about like the first 4 minifigures, and the rest of them to me are just okay. But without further ado, let's jump into looking at each and every one of the individual minifigs in reverse order. Starting off with the crazy cat lover, this is admittedly one of the least interesting minifigures in the series, but you still have to admit, for a collectible minifigure, you have to respect the amount of effort and detail that goes into the printing of even some of the characters that are not the most interesting. I really love the sweater print and how it continues alongside the arms. It's not the most useful or versatile print, but it's really nicely done, and having 3 different strips of color alongside the sweater really makes this minifigure stand out. I also love the new mold introduced for the cat. I hope that appears outside of just this minifigure series in different colors. I feel like it totally could, and the minifigure itself has 2 different facial expressions, one that's very happy and one that you initially saw that's probably a little bit overwhelmed by the cat. They also introduced a brand new yarn ball element in this set, which does appear across some of the new 2025 LEGO Friends sets, so it's good to see that piece not being just locked for collectible minifigures, and getting the hair piece introduced for the BTS Idea set is also really good in a new color. Next up, we have the Plush Collector, and this introduces a brand new mold for an egg-shaped plushie. I'm not really sure what exactly it's supposed to represent. I guess it's supposed to be bunny-like in shape. I think it's pretty cute as a mold, and I'm really curious to see what else LEGO does with it. It has an attachment point for a pin on the top, so you can add accessories, which are not included in this minifigure, but I'm sure they're going to be including it in some other sets. And once again, despite the fact that this minifigure might not be the most interesting, I really love the fact that it has arm printing for the pajamas, and I'm sure those pajamas are just going to be useful for a slumber party in general. The minifigure does have 2 different expressions and recolors the Monkey Kid May hair in pink, and I just think the pajama-like jumpsuit with clear cat ears on the back of the hoodie is just a really cute little concept. Again, not really much I can say about this minifigure. The 2 little plushie pieces are cute, but let's move on. Next up, speaking of cuteness, we have the Hamster Costume Fan. This is another one of these standard LEGO collectible minifigure cute creatures in costumes type of bit, and I think it's okay for what it is. The hamster mold for the headpiece is a really nice one, and I do love the dual molded short legs. I feel like they add a lot to the figure, as well as the plain dual molded arms, which I also feel like could be useful outside of this. The only thing that I think would have really improved this minifigure would have been the addition for a new mold that actually showcases the bushy tail. They do print it on the back, but I think having like a circular tail element to add on to this minifigure would have added a lot to the character, especially because the prints are a little bit generic, especially for the face. It's a new print, but it's not the most exciting, and the accessory is just a printed 1x1 piece of lime, which I guess hamsters do like eating, so that's why that's there. Otherwise, not the most exciting minifigure, but just some good dual molded components. Could have been better though. Moving on to Cupid, this I actually feel like might have a lot of useful applications because they've introduced a brand new mold for the wings. Rather than having the wings stretch around a neck bracket, they are using a standard neck bracket and having these wings attached via stud. I can see this being really useful if they recolor it for statues or just different ornamental pieces in a build or a crest. It's a really interesting piece, and I hope that we see this outside of just this minifigure. Overall, that is really the most exciting part of the figure to me. It pairs up really nicely with the Aarakocra Ranger from the D&D minifig series because it kind of feels like you could use this on a younger version of that character or species, and overall, the headpiece is a really unique dual molded one with hearts for eyes, which I'm sure is going to be really useful for just other applications. The bow has been recolored in red, which is a nice recolor to use for the standard LEGO bow piece, and the legs are actually dual molded, which is really nicely done with the yellow and the white. I also really love the golden armband on the side of the character. I feel like that's going to fit in really well with Greek mythology like minifigures or even some medieval type stuff, so you can always use this figure's pieces for different things, although honestly the most disappointing thing is that it doesn't actually introduce even a new color for the hair. It's just using the recolored J hair, which we've seen in Cooper from LEGO Dreams, so it's not necessarily the most exciting thing because again, we've gotten this hairpiece a ton of times across the LEGO Dreams sets. The other accessory is a simple heart, and while it would have been cool to see it printed, I think it is okay for what it is, and we're starting to get into the more interesting minifigures here. Moving on from Cupid though, we can take a look at the next civilian-style LEGO minifigure, and that is the Longboarder. The most notable thing about the longboarder is, well, the longboard. This is a brand new type of skateboard for LEGO minifigures to use, and once again, I am curious if it will ever appear again, but I like it. It's a nice alternative to the standard skateboard that we got, and again, another useful accessory I hope will not remain exclusive to just this minifigure. I also really like the minifigure itself, because again, despite the fact that it is a standard civilian, they really spared no expense with the printing, having printed on black shoes, a line going down for the sewing for the jeans, which is just going to be really useful for making sig figs and custom minifigures really pop. You also have printing on the side of the arms for the logo on the shirt, and I really love the recolor of the hidden side hat and hair combo piece in green and black, which is just a really cool one. The headpiece is very expressive as well, with a bandage on the side of the head, as well as a gray backpack. It's a really nicely done minifigure, and even though it's just a regular civilian, I really like the way that this was done. It's a minifigure that does fit in very well in the standard city, but does introduce a lot of useful pieces that I'm sure folks are going to love. Moving on from that, we have the Astronomy Fan, and this is one of the most interesting minifigures in the series for a number of reasons. Do not let appearances fool you, despite the fact that this does appear to be a standard kind of realistic city minifigure with plain unprinted teal legs. They went all out when creating multiple new components for this minifigure, and the one that immediately stands out is of course the prosthetic hand. We got a version of this for LEGO Friends just last year, but this introduces a really nice minifigure arm connection piece as well, and it's really cool seeing them be able to do this as a minifigure, so you can actually make a minifigure version of the LEGO Friends character, and also is just really good for diversity and inclusion when it comes to minifigures. This also opens up a whole new world of possibilities for LEGO minifigures, because that arm is a bar connection. If you want to make a minifigure with a gigantic laser arm or a robot claw or something crazy like that, well, you can now. And I don't know if LEGO will ever actually use it for that. I don't know if that really kind of toes the line between what's okay, but honestly, I think it is a very versatile piece, and personally, I would love to see like a DC Cyborg minifigure being made with an arm like this, where you can actually have that cast in silver and then just attach different arm attachments to each arm. The other really notable new piece though is this bottom element for the telescope. This appears throughout a number of new sets in 2025, namely the LEGO Friends elements, but I find it to be really interesting. It's basically a tripod-like format which looks a lot like the standard LEGO flower piece, but has a lot of really interesting connection points, and I really love the way that it was built out in general. It's a really interesting new element, and one that I'm sure is going to be super useful for future applications throughout LEGO, so I'm a big fan of its inclusion, and I can't wait to see what else LEGO does with the piece. Moving on from that, let's take a look at the Pterodactyl Costume Fan. This is another one in the dinosaurs costume lineup, starting with the T-Rex and the Triceratops, and next of course is the Pterodactyl, and these minifigures are always super popular, so it makes sense why LEGO would keep doing them. It uses a very similar format to the bat wings that we first saw in Series 8 of collectible minifigures, and then were later used in stuff like Man-Bat from DC, but it's a completely new mold because you have a different style of wing, which I think is really cool and interesting. Pretty limited in applications, but still interesting nonetheless. Unfortunately, no back printing on the sand blue torso here, which is a little strange how they don't even have like a zipper or anything. Two different expressions, which is nice, and a brand new mold for the headpiece, which I'm sure is only going to be exclusive to this figure, but overall, while the applications are fairly limited, it is nice having the start of a brand new collection of dinosaur costume minifigs, and there's not much else I can say about that. Much more interesting to me though is the Boogeyman. This introduces a brand new head mold which is really similar to the Yeti and Chima Beaver head mold that we got back in the day, but introduces it in a brand new type of detailing with an addition of connection points on the side to add in horns. I like how generic in a sense they made this headpiece with a fully flat face that you can pretty much print anything on, because I feel like if LEGO was creative enough, they could use this mold for a variety of different things, both licensed and non-licensed. licensed, which I think could be really cool. I could see a ton of different characters being made using this pretty versatile headpiece, and it's one that I hope does not remain exclusive to the collectible minifigures. The headpiece expression is really funny, it has a very cheerful and playful aspect to it, despite it being the boogeyman, and I love the print on the book as well, kind of looks like a more ominous warning about the character, and overall, it's an interesting topic to make for a minifigure, not necessarily one I would have thought of for a CMF, but one that I think works out really well. And moving on from that, at number 4 we have the Pirate Quartermaster. When the minifigure list was first revealed, a lot of people had high hopes for this minifigure, and while I think it doesn't necessarily live up to the expectations, it's still a really nicely detailed minifigure. I like the recolor of this existing LEGO Friends hairpiece in red and black, although it would have been really cool to see a more pirate-focused headpiece, but everything else about the figure is really well done. The dual molded arms with printing on the side of the arms is one of the best features about the figure, because it really looks like there are kind of frills on the end of the shoulders there, which looks really well done just by printing yellow dots on the side. You have nice bracelets going around, a brand new mold for the bird, and a waist cape and dual molded legs. They really went all out with this figure. The only thing I think would have been even cooler is if they made a brand new mold for a new type of pirate specific sword. Just getting the standard classic sword is a little bit uninteresting. I think they could have really gone all out and maybe done something like they used to do for Pirates of the Caribbean with a super detailed like dual color sword, but as it is, this minifigure feels like it could have been almost perfect to me, just with the addition of a few new pieces. And yes, I know that that would be asking for a lot, we already are getting the new bird, but I feel like this minifigure was almost there. It could have been so much better, but unfortunately just falls short in a couple of different places. Moving on from that though, let's take a look at the next minifigure, which is the Steampunk Inventor. Now this is a great character. I love the printing on the side of the arms, the dual molded legs, the recolor of the top hat with a print on it looks really fantastic, and again, I feel that this is really special because we don't often get steampunk LEGO minifigures, and this is the perfect one. I also love how even on the side of the other arm, it's printed with almost mechanical detail on the side, which really makes us feel like it is in the steampunk world. The head expression is perfect as well, with a monocle and a mustache, exactly what I would think when I think Steampunk Inventor, and getting the arm piece actually molded in a new color in gold for that gauntlet element, and a new print for the 1x1 cylinder is super cool, with steam of course coming out of the side. The dual molded legs are really well done, and again, while we maybe could have used some printing on the side of the legs, I still think this is such a cool minifigure, and I hope that we get more steampunk oriented LEGO stuff in the future. From there, we can move on to the Wolfpack Beastmaster. This introduces a brand new mold for the wolf, which is going to be really useful for like Game of Thrones dioramas and just general LEGO creatures, but the star of the show to me is a brand new CMF decked out version of a Wolfpack member. After we got a new version of the Wolfpack soldier in the LEGO Medieval Village earlier this year, it's really cool to get a fully decked out CMF version of the character, and there's a lot to love here. First of all, the fuzzy cape is really interesting, the way they actually were able to do this, making it feel a little bit more special than a regular cape. The expressions on the face where you actually have a wolf howling expression is really cool, a brand new print for the Wolfpack shield, and of course, the minifigure itself is phenomenally detailed. This is the kind of minifigure I absolutely will be army building because it is so cool, and I definitely want to get a ton of these for my troops. You have dual molded legs, dual molded arms, printing on the side of the arms showcasing chains underneath the suit, where you actually have some chainmail armor factored into the minifigure. Just really phenomenal detailing. The Tournament Knight sword, which is a really good sword to use, and of course those dual molded legs with boots. It's just so cool, and reminds me of the phenomenal Black Falcon's Falcon Master, which we just got a few series ago, and I hope that LEGO will continue doing this, introducing a classic LEGO castle faction in a castle-oriented set, and then, a year or so later, introducing a much more detailed version of the minifigure in that faction for a collectible minifigure. It's so cool. We've gotten Fright Knights, Black Falcons, and now we've gotten the Wolfpack. So who is next? I'm super curious what else they do because this is so cool. But moving on to my number 1 pick, we have the Jetpack Racer. Now the Jetpack Racer is hands down one of the best collectible minifigures, in my opinion, ever. Originally starting off as a cancelled LEGO video minifigure, which you could just see on screen thanks to early development files, LEGO was able to reuse the old mold. Instead of just getting rid of all that development effort, they decided to turn it into a completely new minifigure here, which I really appreciate and also makes me very sad we never got that other minifigure because that would have been a really cool color scheme. The Jetpack Racer though is super cool, having references tying back to Octan, of course the classic LEGO fuel company, printing on the sides of the arms and legs, and one of the coolest dual molded helmet elements ever, which honestly I feel like could really work for a comics version of Ultron from LEGO Marvel with the way that it's done. You have also a really nice, just simple build for the jetpack using that D-snot element, which is very useful, and two different expressions for the head as well, which I'm sure are going to come in handy. One with the mask fully on, and then one with the mask removed, showcasing the minifigure's expression underneath. The printing on this minifigure is stellar. The white, the red, and the blue color scheme comes together phenomenally, and I also really like how they decided to make this its own concept. When images first leaked back in September, I initially thought that this was supposed to be an homage to LEGO Space Police 1, which would also have been really cool with the white and transparent red, but the more I look at it, the more I actually appreciate that it is its own thing. It is something completely unique as a jetpack racer, and I really wish and hope that LEGO will continue to give us more versions of this minifigure. I now want that helmet in all the different colors, especially that gunmetal gray and red color that we saw on that cancelled video minifigure, because that would be super cool. With the jetpack removed, the prints on the back of the minifigure are also really nicely done. You've got all sorts of great details showcasing the levels of the jetpack with kind of a gray strap on the back, and altogether, this is just the kind of minifigure that I feel will be super useful in any sort of sci-fi diorama, and you could totally use that helmet for a Space Police minifigure if you wanted to. It's by far my favorite minifigure, and I'm of course very partial to sci-fi. I love it when LEGO does anything sci-fi, so obviously I'm gonna love that minifigure, but it is to me easily the #1 figure on this list, and another one I absolutely will be army building. And so, with that, we have summed up my thoughts on the entirety of LEGO Minifigures Series 27, going from arguably the least interesting minifigures to the most interesting. It's definitely a pretty mixed series, but again, I do understand that some of the minifigures I'm not interested in just simply aren't for everyone, and someone's favorite minifigure in the series might be the hamster costume fan, because maybe you own a hamster, maybe you just find that really cute, or the plush collector, which I felt wasn't super interesting, but maybe if that really scratches your itch, then go for it. LEGO is doing a good job at making these minifigure series feel diverse and spread out in the subject matter and the different types of figures you can get, and this is one of the most extreme series that I've seen, just covering all ends of the spectrum. And while I guess I said at the beginning of the video that it would have been cool to maybe see a few more kind of fantastical minifigures or a few less standard civilians, I have to admit that over the past few series, LEGO has been hyper-focused on one particular type of archetype. Space, D&D/castle, you name it, they've been very focused on that type of minifigure, so it is interesting to see one minifigure series come out that is very diverse in the types of figures it offers. That's all I have to say, and I hope you enjoyed this early look at a great collectible minifigure series. Definitely one of the ones that I don't know if I'm as excited for compared to some of the last ones, but to be fair, the last few minifigure series have been absolutely spoiling me because I love space and I love castle, so to get two minifigure series kinda back to back with stuff like that is totally a treat for me. So I totally understand we gotta step back and do something a little bit more diverse and generic like this, and I do appreciate this, and I absolutely will be collecting my favorites. But of course, those were just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments, how would you rank the minifigures in this series? Which ones are you most excited for? And thank you so much for staying tuned. I have a lot more LEGO reviews on the way. One quick thing I have to say is that yes, I have gotten in a lot of the new sets, Monkey Kid, Star Wars, Dreams, so on and so forth. Unfortunately though, I am actually not home. I have been recalled away for some urgent work in New York, so actually, this video is being filmed with footage a friend sent to me, and all of the other sets are sitting at home, so I apologize for the delay in reviews. I am trying to wrap up my work here in the city as soon as possible so I can return home and get back to getting some early reviews out, so thank you for your patience and stay tuned because I should be going home at some point soon, I hope. That's all for this video. Thanks so much for tuning in, and bye for now.